Hello, all. Today I'm exploring why U.S. intelligence agencies are consistently face obstacles in sharing information and coordinating their efforts. I chose this topic because nearly every major intelligence breakdown from the years preceding 9/11 to more recent domestic threats reveals a pattern of poor communication. Understanding why these gaps persist helps us assess reform efforts and imagine more effective approaches. Here is the agenda for today. So, why does this topic matter? The communication issues and rivalries between intelligence agencies that make it difficult for agencies to work together have many negative side effects. Side effects such as a lack of efficiency and intelligence failures, which in turn lead to public mistrust. Communication failures have national level consequences. Rand describes that domestic intelligence systems are complex and dispersed, involving federal, state, local, and even private sector actors whose roles and coordination mechanisms are inconsistent. Birch reinforces that major organizational reforms since 9/11, such as establishing the DHS and DNI, did improve certain processes but did not resolve deeper, long-standing communication barriers. Richardson adds that historical context, the U.S. intelligence system evolved in a piecemeal fashion across decades, creating a vast but uneven community in which agencies maintained significant autonomy. This history built institutional habits that make seamless communication very difficult. On to the key driving factors. There are six recurring driving factors that emerge: structural fragmentation, conflicting mission and organizational cultures, legal and classification barriers, uneven data quality and information overload, inconsistent interagency networks, and gaps in training and analytical standards. These drivers create systemic communication problems that no single reform has yet to fully solve. Onto structural fragmentation. Rand emphasizes that the domestic intelligence landscape contains numerous nodes: FBI, DHS, CIA, military entities, local law enforcement, and private sector partners operating without unified architecture. Richardson similarly explains that the U.S. intelligence community grew incrementally, not through deliberate design. As a result, intelligence agencies developed overlapping authorities and distinct operational cultures, contributing to structural friction. This fragmentation resulted in confusion over who leads on specific threats, redundant or conflicting intelligence activities, multiple incompatible systems and databases, and difficulty coordinating reform across many actors. Cultural and mission differences. Culture is one of the most stubborn barriers to communication. Rand highlights that the FBI traditionally operated from a law enforcement mindset focused on case-driven investigations rather than broader intelligence synthesis. Richardson underscores a broad pattern. Every major intelligence agency service component has its own history, priorities, and worldview. These organizational identities result in different sharing thresholds, competing interpretations of threats, and a reluctance to rely on outside assessments. Hellman's work also demonstrates that cultural clashes are common in interagency collaborations across sectors, especially when responsibilities overlap. Legal and classification and procedural barriers. Rand identifies the maze of classification rules, clearance levels, and handling restrictions as a major source of communication delays. Birch points out that the overclassification worsened after 9/11, with dozens of sensitive but unclassified categories used inconsistently across federal agencies. This results in uncertainty about what can be shared, with whom it can be shared, and under what circumstances. Richardson adds that strict protection of sources and methods, especially with signals intelligence, creates institutional tendencies towards secrecy rather than collaboration. These legal and procedural barriers are intended to protect national security, but they simultaneously create major communication bottlenecks. Rand notes that agencies often collect too much poor quality information that lack coordination and clear guidance about what is useful. This contributes to analysts being overwhelmed by the volume of information, difficulty in distinguishing high value intelligence, and agencies using incompatible data standards. Hellman similarly highlights how collaboration suffers when organizations use different information sharing systems, data vocabularies, and confidentiality practices. Uneven interagency networks. Birch shows that the rise of fusion centers and joint task forces create new spaces for cooperation, but their effectiveness varies dramatically. Some are well integrated, while others lack resources, training, or federal engagement. This produces a patchwork system where some jurisdictions receive robust intelligence updates, while others operate with limited information. The inconsistency undermines national situational awareness. On to training and analytical standards. Birch emphasizes that the U.S. lacks a unified professional development pathway for intelligence analysts. Current training is fragmented and analytical techniques are not standardized. Richardson echoes this point, noting that agencies have long developed their own analytical cultures and methods. Without shared training and analytical frameworks, agencies can interpret identical information very differently, reducing the value of shared intelligence. My argument is that the root of the problem is not simply organizational by design, but it is the dominance of an agency-centric mindset. Each organization still prioritizes its own mission, its own authorities, and its own legacy. A more effective model would be a mission-centric collaboration emphasizing shared outcomes such as domestic threat prevention over agency boundaries. Achieving this would require standardized analytical training, simplified and unified classification practices, shared performance metrics, strong incentives for interagency work, and common data platforms and definitions. These reforms target the underlying conditions that repeatedly frustrate communication, even after major structural changes. Communication issues in the intelligence agency community stem from the long-standing structural, cultural, legal, and procedural factors. Improving communication requires more than new agencies. It requires shifting norms, redesigning processes, and aligning the intelligence community around a shared mission. Thank you so much for listening. And this is my works cited for what I used that wasn't the textbooks. Thank you.